My ex wants to get coffee and catch up. You're not invited, she informed me. Understood, I said. Got the ring deposit back while she was gone. When she came home, I was packed. How was coffee? Good. Why are you... We're done. The Saturday morning sun cut a bright line across our hardwood floor in the downtown Orlando condo, catching dust motes dancing in the air. It was our kind of morning, lazy and quiet. The scent of the Colombian coffee I'd brewed hung in the apartment, a familiar, comforting smell. I was scrolling through industry reports on my phone, my feet propped on the ottoman, feeling the simple, uncomplicated peace of a weekend with no sales calls scheduled. Lindsay, however, was moving with a purpose that felt out of place. I watched her over the top of my screen. She was at the full-length mirror by the door, not in her usual weekend uniform of yoga pants and one of my old medical conference t-shirts, but in a dark-fitted dress that I recognized from our anniversary, dinner last year. She'd done her makeup, the kind that took time, the subtle smoky eye, the precise lip liner. This wasn't for brunch with her marketing team girlfriends. That look was louder, more colorful. This was something else entirely. You look nice, I said, putting my phone down. Big plans? She didn't turn from the mirror, instead adjusting the line of her dress. Yeah, just meeting someone for coffee. The casual tone was a little too forced. A tiny alarm bell, soft but persistent, started ringing in the back of my mind. After 3.5 years together, I knew her tells. I kept my voice light, easy. Oh, cool. Who with? She finally turned, but her eyes were on her phone, her thumbs tapping out a message. A small, almost imperceptible smile played on her freshly lined lips. My ex, Brandon. He's in town for work. The words landed, but they didn't fully compute at first. Brandon, the one from before me. The one with the pharmaceutical sales territory and the trust. Fun backup. The one she'd told me was emotionally unavailable and obsessed with appearances. My stomach tightened. Brandon, I repeated, the name feeling foreign and unpleasant in my mouth. Okay, so when are we meeting him? This was the moment. This was where she was supposed to say, yeah, for like an hour, just catching up, you know. This was where I would have grumbled but gone along, because that's what you do in a relationship approaching 4 years. You show a united front. But she didn't say that. She looked up from her phone, and her gaze was steady, devoid of any apology or request for understanding. It was a statement, a declaration. There was a flicker in her eyes, not guilt, but something closer to superiority, like she was privy to a secret I was too dull to understand. We're just going to catch up, she said, her voice cool and clear. A pause, deliberately held for maximum impact. Then the knife twisted with casual, dismissive precision. You're not invited. The warm air left the room. The coffee scent turned acrid. The sunny, peaceful morning shattered into a million sharp, glittering pieces. You're not invited. The words echoed in the silence of my head. This wasn't about coffee. This wasn't about catching up with an old flame. This was a power play. It was a deliberate, cruel drawing of a line. I am going to a place you cannot follow. I am prioritizing a connection with my past over my present with you. And I am explicitly telling you that you are excluded. I felt the weight in my front pocket, the crumpled receipt from Tiffany & Co. I'd picked up the custom-designed ring yesterday, 14-karat white gold, 1.2 carats, with a pave band. The plan was to surprise her tonight, to cook her favorite pasta, to get down on one knee right here in this patch of Orlando sunlight. The deposit had been massive, 20,100 saved over 4 months of working overtime calls to surgeons and hospital administrators. The ring was finished. It was waiting for me to pick up the remaining balance. It was supposed to be the start of everything, and she was telling me I wasn't invited to her life. I saw the future in that single, heartbeat-long moment. The arguments, the "you're being controlling" accusations if I objected, the simmering resentment if I said nothing, the slow, painful death of my self-respect as I accepted this new, diminished role in her world. The alarm bell in my mind wasn't ringing anymore. It was a single, clear, resonant tone, a tone of absolute, unshakable clarity. I looked at her, at the woman I was ready to build a life with, and I saw a stranger. The emotion, the hurt, the anger, the betrayal was a storm raging inside me. but I built a wall of ice around it. I let none of it show, not a flicker. My voice, when it came out, was calm, flat. It wasn't a question. It wasn't a plea. It was an acceptance of terms. "Understood," I said. She looked almost disappointed for a second, as if she'd been prepared for a fight and I'd handed her a white flag instead. She gave a slight dismissive nod, grabbed her purse, and walked out the door. The click of the latch was the loudest sound I'd ever heard. I stood there in the quiet, sun-drenched condo, the ghost of her perfume hanging in the air, and the receipt for a future that would never happen burning a hole in my pocket. The time for confusion was over. The time for action had begun. "Understood." The word hung in the air after the door clicked shut. It wasn't just a word. It was a key turning in a lock. The lock on the box where I kept all my love for her, all my plans, all my patience. I turned that key, sealed it shut, and contained the storm of emotion inside me. The hurt, the blinding rage, the sickening feeling of betrayal was instantly muted. It was still there, a roiling thunderhead, but it was now contained, distant. The energy it generated was no longer chaotic. It was transformed into a cold, focused current. I moved. My first action wasn't frantic. It was deliberate. I pulled my wallet from my back pocket and extracted the receipt. It was creased from a day of carrying it around, a tangible secret. The jeweler's elegant logo was embossed at the top. Below it, the description: 14K, white gold, 1.2 CT custom solitaire with pave band. And the number, the staggering number that represented 4 months of overtime. I dialed the number printed on the receipt. My hand was steady. My voice, when the receptionist answered, was unnervingly calm. "Yes, hello. My name is Dean Parker. I have an order for a ring, pickup scheduled for today." I gave her the order number. "I need to cancel the order and process a refund of my deposit to my original card." "Oh." The woman on the other end sounded surprised, a little flustered. "I'm so sorry to hear that, sir. Is everything all right?" "The engagement is off," I stated, my tone flat, factual. I offered no further explanation. There was no crack in my voice, no performative sadness. I was closing a business transaction that was no longer profitable. I see. Of course, sir. I'll process that for you right now. The refund may take 3 to 5 business days to appear." "Thank you," I said, and ended the call. I placed the receipt on the granite kitchen counter, right in the center, a monument to a canceled future. Then I walked to the bedroom and pulled my largest suitcase and a set of moving boxes from the top of the closet, the ones I'd kept from my last apartment transition. I worked with an efficient, detached rhythm. This wasn't a heartbroken man packing. This was a strategist executing an extraction. I started with my clothes, my side of the walk-in closet, my drawers from the dresser we'd bought together at West Elm. I didn't look at her things. I didn't pause to smell a sweater of hers, or look at the photos on the nightstand. Those were relics from a country I had been forcibly deported from. They held no power over me anymore. I took only what was unequivocally mine: the books on my nightstand, my laptop and work files, my charger, the noise-canceling headphones I'd bought myself after landing the biggest account of my career. I left the 65-inch TV we'd bought together, the KitchenAid mixer she'd insisted on, the throw pillows that cost more than my car payment. They were part of the life I was leaving behind. Artifacts of a shared history that had just been proven to be built on false premises. They were ballast, and I was cutting it all loose. Each item placed into a box was a weight lifted. The suitcase held my essentials, enough for a week while I figured out permanent housing. The boxes held the rest of my former life, carefully categorized: work clothes, casual wear, personal items, electronics. I carried them down to my Honda Accord, load after load, filling the trunk and the back seat. The physical exertion felt good, cleansing. It was a purge. When the last box was in the car, I did a final walkthrough. The condo already felt different. It wasn't our home anymore. It was her space, and it felt emptier, smaller somehow. I stood in the living room, that same patch of sun, now highlighting the faint indentations in the rug where my furniture had been. I was done. There was nothing left of me here. I grabbed my car keys and the single box of final items, my toothbrush, my razor, the few toiletries from the bathroom we'd shared. I didn't look back. I walked out the door, down the hallway, into my car. I didn't drive away immediately. I sat in the driver's seat, the engine off, and pulled out my phone. I went to her contact, a picture of her laughing, the one I'd taken during our weekend in Savannah last spring. I looked at it for one last, long second. Then I tapped the screen a few times. Block this caller. A confirmation pop-up appeared. Are you sure you want to block this contact? I was sure. I tapped block contact. Then, and only then, did I start the car. I didn't have a destination, not yet. A Hampton Inn for the night, probably. Then, tomorrow, I'd start looking for a new place, a fresh start. But for now, the only thing that mattered was that I was moving forward, away from her. The rearview mirror was just glass. I had nothing left to look for in it. I didn't have to wait long. I was leaning against my car door in the visitor parking area, the evening air carrying the familiar Orlando humidity, when her silver Camry pulled into her assigned spot. The streetlights had just flickered on, casting the scene in pale orange light. I watched her get out, noting the slight unsteady sway in her step. She had had more than coffee. There was wine involved, maybe cocktails. She was humming something to herself, a small, satisfied smile on her face, as she rummaged in her purse for her keys. She didn't see me at first. She was still in the bubble of her afternoon, the bubble from which I had been explicitly excluded. I pushed off from the car and took a few steps into the light, pooling between the vehicles. The sound of my shoes on the pavement made her look up. The smile vanished, replaced by startled confusion, as her eyes landed on me, then darted to the packed interior of my car, visible through the windows. "Dean, what's with all the boxes?" she asked, her voice tinged with slow-dawning alarm. She gestured weakly at my obviously loaded vehicle. I didn't answer her question. Instead, I kept my voice utterly level, a stark contrast to her building unease. "How was coffee?" The question threw her. It was so normal, so mundane, and it hung in the space between us, utterly at odds with the visual evidence of my departure. "It was," she started, her brow furrowed, defensive gears already turning. "It was good. Why are you—" "We're done." The 3 words cut through her sentence cleanly, without malice or heat. They were simply a statement of fact, delivered with the finality of a judge's gavel. For a second there was only silence. Then the unraveling began. "What?" The word was a sharp, disbelieving laugh. "You're breaking up with me because I had coffee with an ex? That's insane." I remained silent, my expression unchanging. My calmness was fuel to her fire. "It was just coffee," she insisted, her voice rising in pitch. "You're being so sensitive, so controlling. I told you about it, didn't I? I was honest." "You were dismissive," I corrected her, my tone still calm. "There's a difference." "Oh my God," she scoffed, throwing her hands up. So I worded it poorly. "You're really going to throw away our entire future, our engagement, over a poorly worded sentence?" The mention of the engagement was my cue. I didn't need to say a word. I just looked at her, letting the silence and the packed car speak for me. The future she was talking about was already in my rearview mirror, her confusion curdled into anger, the true colors rising to the surface now that manipulation and minimization had failed. "You're pathetic," she spat, her face contorting. "You're actually doing this. You're running away because you can't handle a confident woman having a life outside of you. You'll never find anyone who puts up with your insecurity like I did. You hear me? Never." The words were meant to wound, to shatter my resolve and make me beg for another chance. They echoed in the quiet parking lot, ugly and desperate. I took a slow breath, not out of need, but as a period to her sentence. I looked at her, really looked at her, and saw exactly what she was. Someone who used exclusion as a weapon, who mistook cruelty for confidence. "The future you're talking about," I said, my voice firm and clear, "ended the moment you told me I wasn't invited to yours. Goodbye, Lindsay." I didn't wait for a response. I turned, got into the driver's seat, and started the engine. The sound was solid, definitive. As I pulled away from the curb, I didn't look back at her. I looked ahead, at the road, stretching out before me, clean and empty and full of possibility. The first part of the rest of my life was a quiet street, fading into the night behind me, and it was enough. The first week was a study in strategic silence. I checked into a Hampton Inn on International Drive, paying $89 a night for a clean, anonymous room that smelled of industrial carpet cleaner and had no memories attached to it. It was perfect for what I needed, a neutral zone where I could rebuild my foundation. I spent the days apartment hunting and the evenings planning my next moves. My phone stayed silent. I'd blocked her number, her Instagram, her Facebook. The peace wasn't empty. It was full of a profound, buzzing clarity. But the silence didn't last. The first attempt came on Tuesday. A text from an unknown number that I knew was hers before I even opened it. "Dean, this is crazy. Can we please talk? You're overreacting. It was just coffee. You're throwing away something real over a misunderstanding." I read it once. The words overreacting and misunderstanding were so predictable, they were almost boring. She was trying to reframe my decisive action as an emotional overreaction, to make her cruelty the subject and my response the problem. I deleted the message and went back to comparing floor plans for one-bedroom apartments. The second attempt was a voicemail left Thursday night. Her voice was different now, stripped of its defensive posture and layered with trembling, performative desperation. "Dean, it's me. Please pick up." "Okay, fine. I get it. You're mad. It was stupid. Brandon was nothing. It meant nothing. He already left town. It was just, I don't know, ego. I made a mistake. A huge, huge mistake. Please, I need you. I'm so alone in this place. It's so quiet. Just call me back, please." I saved the voicemail, not out of sentiment, but as evidence. Evidence of the shift from blame to begging. The admission of ego that confirmed everything I'd suspected. Elle wasn't sorry for her actions. She was sorry for the consequences. I deleted the voicemail and blocked that number too. By Friday, the flying monkey arrived. My phone buzzed with a call from Jessica Torres, Lindsay's younger sister. "Dean, hey, it's Jess." Her voice was saccharine, laced with false concern. "I know what Lindsay did was messy, but she's a complete wreck. You have to understand. She's spiraling. She's really, really sorry. A real man would find it in his heart to forgive her." I stopped packing my new apartment boxes for a moment. "Jessica," I said, my voice devoid of emotion, "is there a point to this call?" She sputtered. "The point is that you're being cruel. She made a mistake. Don't you care about her at all?" "That," I stated calmly, "is no longer my concern. Do not contact me again." I ended the call and blocked her number. The pattern was complete. The pleas, the anger, the enlisted allies. It was all a script I was no longer reading from. A final email slipped. Through a day later, from an account I didn't recognize, but the voice was unmistakably hers. Subject: "I get it now, Dean. I'm writing this because you've blocked me everywhere else. I went to the jeweler today to see. I don't know what I was going to see. They told me you canceled the ring. You got your deposit back the day I left. That's when I finally understood. You weren't mad. You weren't hurt. You were done. You made your decision while I was still at the coffee shop. You were already gone. Brandon hasn't answered a single text. He used the ketchup to try to sleep with me one last time for old time's sake. And when I said no, he vanished. He was just using me, and I threw us away for that, for nothing. I get it now. I finally understand what I lost, and I have to live with that. Lindsay." I read it once, then selected the email and clicked delete. I didn't need her understanding. I didn't need her closure. Her unraveling was not my burden to carry. The karma wasn't dramatic. It was quiet and total. She was alone in the apartment she had made sacred to her own exclusion, haunted by the ghost of a future she had casually incinerated for an ego stroke from a man who saw her as a conquest. She was struggling financially, having relied on my income for the larger bills. She was isolated, her social circle now tainted by the pathetic truth of her situation. And I felt nothing for her but distant academic pity, the kind you might feel for a historical figure who made a catastrophically bad decision. It was over. Her consequences were hers to manage. My life was just beginning. 2 months later, I was in a booth at the Brass Tap on Colonial Drive, laughing with my closest friends over craft beer and wings. The air was thick with the smell of fried food and the noise of Thursday night trivia, and I was relaxed in a way I hadn't been in years. Zach, my accountant buddy, was telling us about his latest dating app disaster. Noah, who worked as an ICU nurse, was shaking his head and offering medical commentary on Zach's questionable life choices. Casey, a high school teacher, was keeping score on napkins and talking trash about our trivia competitors. This was my world now. It was louder, messier, and infinitely more honest than what I'd left behind. I'd found a solid one-bedroom apartment in Winter Park, close enough to downtown for work, but far enough away to feel like a fresh start. The rent was $1,400, exactly half of what Lindsay and I had been paying together, and it was mine. No shared decisions, no compromise on throw pillows, no walking on eggshells around someone else's mood. My medical device sales territory was thriving. Without the constant emotional drain of managing relationship drama, I'd closed 3 major hospital contracts in the past month. My commission check last week was the biggest of my career. I'd even started working out again, hitting the gym at 5:30 a.m. before calls. The routine felt good, purposeful, disciplined. I was rebuilding not just my living situation, but myself. "Dude, you're like a different person," Noah had told me the week before. "I mean that in the best way. You seem, lighter." He was right. The constant tension I didn't even realize I'd been carrying was gone. I wasn't walking around waiting for the next subtle put-down, the next test of my boundaries, the next power play disguised as relationship dynamics. I saw her the moment she walked in. Lindsay. She was with Jessica, both of them hovering by the entrance like they were bracing against cold wind. Lindsay looked thin. The black dress she wore was one I recognized, but it now hung on her a little too loosely. Her eyes scanned the room with desperate purpose. When they landed on me, they widened, then filled with hungry, desperate hope. I looked away, turning back to Casey's explanation of why our team name, Quiz in My Pants, was both juvenile and brilliant. I took a slow sip of my IPA. The peace inside me didn't so much as ripple. A shadow fell over our table. I looked up. She was standing there, her hands clenched into nervous fists at her sides. Jessica lingered a few feet behind, shooting daggers at me with her eyes. "Dean, hi." Her voice was fragile, barely audible over the bar's noise. "You look good." I gave a slight polite nod, the kind you'd give a former coworker you barely remembered. "Lindsay, how are you?" The question, so simple and devoid of subtext, seemed to undo her completely. Her composure cracked. "Not great," she admitted, words tumbling out in a rushed, shaky confession. "Actually, terrible. I miss you. What I did was the stupidest thing I've ever done. Brandon meant nothing. You meant everything." She was waiting for it. For me to soften, to say, "I'm sorry you're hurting," or "maybe we can talk," to offer her a lifeline back into my orbit. I said nothing. I just looked at her, my expression neutral, my eyes clear. There was no anger in them, no lingering love, not even cold satisfaction. There was simply nothing, a vast, quiet expanse of indifference. My silence was more terrifying to her than any shout would have been. She filled it, her voice cracking with emotion. "So, that's it? After all that time? After everything we built?" I placed my beer glass down on the coaster with a soft, final click. I wasn't talking to the woman I'd loved. I was explaining a basic fact of the universe to a stranger. "That was a different life," I said, my voice calm and even. "I've made my peace with this one. I'm happy here." I paused, letting the truth of those words settle in the space between us. She could feel it, the genuine, unshakable contentment that radiated from me. It was something she could never fake, never manipulate, never take away. "And you're not in it." For a long moment, she just stood there, completely still, the desperate hope in her eyes extinguished, replaced by dawning, horrifying understanding. She was looking at a man who was truly, completely free. Her presence, her pain, her very existence was as relevant to him as a stranger's. Without another word, she turned and walked away, her shoulders slumped in defeat that was both total and permanent. Jessica shot me one last venomous look before scurrying after her. Casey whistled low. "Dude, who was that?" I picked up my beer again, the faintest genuine smile touching my lips, as I turned back to my friends, back to my life, back to the trivia question about 90s sitcoms that actually mattered in this moment. "No one," I said, and I meant it. No one at all. The conversation moved on. Casey was arguing that Full House was technically superior to Family Matters because of the Danny Tanner factor. Zach was pulling up statistics on his phone to settle a debate about Michael Jordan's career scoring average. Noah was ordering another round and complaining about his hospital's new scheduling system. Normal conversation, normal life. normal friendships that didn't require constant negotiation or walking on eggshells. I was exactly where I belonged. The trivia host announced the final round, movie quotes from the 1990s. Our table erupted in competitive energy, everyone leaning in to strategize. I found myself laughing at something ridiculous Zach said about Titanic, and I realized this was the sound of my actual voice, not the measured, careful tone I'd developed over 3.5 years of relationship management. Outside, Orlando hummed with its usual Thursday night energy. Inside, I was surrounded by people who accepted me as I was, who didn't need me to be smaller or quieter or more manageable. My phone buzzed with a text from my boss about a potential new contract with Orlando Regional. My apartment lease renewal notice could wait until tomorrow. My gym bag was packed for the 5:30 a.m. session. Life was simple, purposeful, and entirely my own. The future stretched ahead of me, clean and full of possibility, and for the first time in years, I was genuinely excited to see what came next. Thanks for watching. Make sure to subscribe to the channel and hit the like button. What do you think about this story? Share it in the comments.